Investigators in Seminole County say that they are working to track down the gunman in a deadly shooting.
This happened early Monday on Reinhardt Road in Seminole County, and we now know 6 people were shot and 1 was killed. West 2's Amanda Dukes is joining us live from the Seminole County Sheriff's Office with the latest.
In the early hours of the 16th of January, 2023, while most residents of Sanford, Florida, were still fast asleep, a horrifying attack shattered the stillness of the night. At the intersection of County Road 46 Ampere and Reinhardt Road, a vehicle carrying 6 women on their way home from a music performance was suddenly ambushed. They had no idea that, within minutes, the familiar road they traveled would turn into the scene of a harrowing crime, one that would leave behind lasting pain and haunting memories for their families and the entire community. Among the 6 women in the car that night, one name, Princess Aura Tolliver, 31 years old, would later be spoken in prayers, remembered through the tears of her loved ones, and echoed in news reports that shook Florida for months to come. She wasn't part of any gang. She had no ties to the growing feuds erupting across the city, and yet, in a single fleeting moment, her life was swept into a wave of violence. She had nothing to do with leaving her an innocent victim in a brutal and senseless act of retaliation. The murder of Princess Tolliver didn't just stun the Sanford community. It raised a storm of agonizing questions. Why would a woman with no ties to violence, simply returning home after a joyful night with friends, become a target? What dark forces orchestrated the attack? And more importantly, how have gang rivalries and revenge become so woven into everyday life that they can so easily steal the lives of those who have nothing to do with them? Today, we'll retrace every step starting from the tense backdrop that set the stage, all the way to the fateful moment that would forever alter an entire community. Before we begin this journey, take a moment to hit like and subscribe so we can continue exploring chilling stories and painful lessons together. And leave a comment to let me know where you're watching from, because sometimes just one shared message can raise awareness and maybe even save a life out there. Princess Aura Tolliver was born and raised in Tallahassee, a city nestled in northern Florida. Her childhood revolved around family, school, and the values her mother always instilled in her. Live with integrity, work hard, and show compassion toward others. Her high school friends recalled that Princess was quiet and gentle, yet remarkably determined. Once she set a goal, she would pursue it with unwavering resolve until she achieved it. As an adult, Princess chose to work as a civilian employee at the Florida State University Police Department. It wasn't a glamorous job, but for her, it was a way to give back to the community, to help ensure young students had a safe environment. Colleagues remembered Princess as someone always punctual, meticulous in her work, and never one to complain, no matter how heavy the workload became. Outside of work, Princess's life revolved around her family and a close-knit circle of friends. She often spent weekends visiting her mother, hosting small gatherings with friends, or simply taking quiet walks in the park near her home. In the eyes of those around her, Princess was a woman of quiet strength, living a simple life, yet always managing to keep a delicate balance between responsibility and joy. Yet, just a few dozen miles from where Princess lived, an entirely different world existed. It was the world of street gangs, a place where loyalty was measured in weapons and silence. Among them, the OTF gang, short for On Top Forever, was emerging as a formidable force in Central Florida. Police records linked OTF to multiple turf wars, violent reprisals, and a web of illegal activities that had spanned years. Princess had no connection to these people. She wasn't involved in the tangled relationships or the simmering conflicts within the city. Her life was so far removed from that world that no one could have imagined the two paths would one day collide in a tragedy written in blood. Investigations later revealed that the attack claiming Princess's life had never been aimed at her. It was a meticulously planned act of revenge, with an entirely different group as the intended target. But the car carrying Princess and her friends happened to pass by at the wrong moment, caught in a hail of bullets that spared no one. It was this senseless cruelty that made her death ignite even deeper outrage and grief throughout the Sanford community. Months before the tragedy, the city of Sanford had already been seeing warning signs of a coming storm of violence. Police reports showed a sharp spike in shootings, most tied to warring street gangs. Among them, the name OTF on top forever kept surfacing again and again in multiple investigations. OTF wasn't a newly formed gang. It had operated for years, with a network stretching from Sanford to neighboring cities. But in the final months of 2022, it grew more aggressive than ever before. The cause, according to investigative sources, traced back to an attack on an OTF member by a rival group. That single incident became the spark, igniting a chain of revenge plots whose brutality no one could have foreseen. Signs of escalation surfaced both on the streets and across social media. Accounts tied to OTF kept posting rap clips laced with taunting lyrics, photos flaunting weapons, and cryptic symbols hinting at the violence to come. In some posts, they even mentioned specific locations, sending a chilling message to their rivals. "We're ready." Residents living near the intersection of County Road 46 Ampere and Reinhardt Road recalled hearing the roar of cars late at night, shouts cutting through the darkness, followed by sudden bursts of gunfire. Once, police even cordoned off the area after a brief shootout, but just hours later, everything fell silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. Amid all this, Princess Aura Tolliver continued living her ordinary life. She didn't follow gang-related social media accounts, nor did she pay attention to the rumors of revenge spreading across the city. Her friends said Princess rarely paid attention to the chaos outside her world. She focused on her job, her family, and weekend gatherings with friends. That very detachment made the tragedy even harder to believe. A woman who lived quietly, steering clear of trouble, ultimately became a victim of the very turmoil she never even knew existed. In the days leading up to the crime, Sanford police had stepped up patrols at several hotspots, including the very intersection where the tragedy would unfold. They had received multiple tips about possible retaliation, yet no one knew the exact time or place. It was like an undercurrent of violence, silently moving beneath the city's seemingly calm surface, waiting for the moment to erupt. From the very first days of January 2023, the atmosphere in Sanford grew heavier, more suffocating than ever. Local police kept receiving anonymous calls and urgent messages from residents about strange cars prowling the streets at night, about bursts of gunfire echoing through familiar intersections. Behind the silence in the headlines, a wave of violence lurked, watching every street, every neighborhood, especially in areas under the grip of gangs like OTF. And if the streets were where the action was being prepared, then social media became the breeding ground for words of war. Posts from anonymous accounts began flooding in, filled with cryptic symbols and veiled threats. Those within the gang world understood the message clearly. A reckoning was about to unfold. No one said it outright, but everyone knew it was coming. Blurry clips surfaced, showing groups gathering in parking lots, weapons in hand. Short, venomous rap verses taunting rivals with initials and locations. All of it pushed the situation closer to the edge of control. One account, believed to be linked to OTF, even posted a chilling bait message: "We don't need to find you. You'll bring yourselves to us." Beneath that post, hundreds of comments, shares, and anonymous replies only poured more fuel on the fire. To distant onlookers, it might have seemed like nothing more than kids playing on the internet. But for law enforcement, every word, every symbol carried a clear warning. Blood would soon be spilled. In a later internal report, police confirmed a series of secret meetings among OTF members in early January. These gatherings took place in cars, in parking lots, or behind closed doors out of sight from any cameras, yet with enough evidence to suggest they were planning a message job to reassert control over their territory. As tensions reached their peak, a major event drew crowds to the Barn, a popular Sanford venue, where rapper Jackboy was set to perform before hundreds of fans. For music lovers, it was simply a night of entertainment. But for certain figures lurking in the shadows, it was the perfect opportunity. Their enemies would be there among a large, chaotic crowd, easy to find and easier to reach. Princess Aura Tolliver, like hundreds of others, came to the show that night for one simple reason: to meet friends and unwind after a long work week. She knew nothing about the gang rivalries, nor that the very event she was attending had already fallen into the crosshairs of those ready to open fire on anyone in their way.
Sigo siendo el mismo vago por la noche fugitivo. La adrenalina corre cuando se ve el peligro. Muerto en vida, listo para el suicidio.
We are drawing closer to that fateful moment where a single press of the gas pedal, a single pull of the trigger, would change not only Princess's life, but the fate of an entire community. On the night of the 15th of January, 2023, the atmosphere at the Barn, a popular performance venue in Sanford, was livelier than usual. The event featuring rapper Jackboy drew a massive crowd, most of them young. Music thumped through the air, laughter echoed, phones lit up as people recorded the moments, all of it weaving together a lively atmosphere that seemed to leave no room for danger. Princess Aura Tolliver was there with her close friends. She had just finished her shift, and the concert was meant to be a brief escape, a chance to relax before returning to the grind on Monday. None of them knew that just outside the venue, watchful eyes were tracking every face, every license plate. Nor did they realize that among the crowd, some hadn't come for the music at all but to confirm their targets. After the concert ended, Princess's group left the area around 2 a.m. They climbed into their familiar van, heading home unaware that what seemed like a routine, safe drive would become the final journey for one of them. The van rolled through the intersection of County Road 46 Ampere and Reinhardt Road, a desolate stretch with no streetlights, no fixed security cameras. Around 2:15 a.m., a dark-colored sedan appeared behind them. Surveillance footage from a nearby store later showed the sedan trailing Princess's group for nearly half a mile before accelerating. The sedan surged forward, pulling up alongside Princess's van in the right lane. Within seconds, the window slid down. A dark figure leaned out, weapon in hand. The first volley of gunfire erupted swift, precise, and merciless. Princess was hit by the first round as she gripped the steering wheel. She never had a chance to react. The van veered off course, swerving violently before slamming into a tree. The crash's impact and the screams tore through the night. Inside the van, the 5 remaining women were injured to varying degrees, panicked, disoriented, with no idea what had just happened. Nearby residents reported hearing an engine roar to life, followed by a burst of gunfire, and finally, the screech of brakes ripping through the night. The first to reach the scene was an employee from a nearby eatery, just about to close up for the night. He recalled that as he approached the vehicle, the front windshield was shattered and blood was trickling down the driver's side door. Princess lay motionless, her head slumped against the steering wheel, unresponsive. One of her friends was still screaming, calling her name over and over, desperately hoping for an answer that would never come. Less than 10 minutes later, Sanford police and emergency responders arrived at the scene. The area was immediately cordoned off. Paramedics rushed to reach the victims, but Princess showed no signs of life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Surveillance footage showed the sedan speeding away from the scene, its license plate obscured. That's when the questions began flooding in. Was this a targeted act of revenge? Who was the real intended target? And why would someone like Princess, a woman with no gang ties whatsoever, be killed in such a calculated, cold-blooded attack? At the scene, police recovered multiple shell casings scattered across the pavement. Based on the angle of the shots and tire marks, they concluded this was a calculated ambush. There was no argument, no provocation, just one vehicle passing by, and another lying in wait. Not long after, the city awoke in shock. Messages spread rapidly across social media, with many asking, "Why her?" and "What did she do to deserve this?" But the cold truth was this: Princess was simply in the wrong place, at the wrong time, caught in the crossfire of a revenge plot she never even knew existed. Within minutes of the shooting, Sanford police units flooded the scene. Red and blue lights cut through the misty night, casting streaks of color across the damp pavement. The intersection of County Road 46 Ampere and Reinhardt Road was quickly sealed off. Investigators set up barricades, collected shell casings, documented the vehicle's position, and began taking statements from the surviving passengers. Princess Aura Tolliver was pronounced dead at the scene. No pulse, no breath. The 5 friends who had been with her sustained varying degrees of injury, from minor scrapes to serious trauma, but all survived. They were rushed to the hospital in a state of shock, some too shaken to even describe what had just happened. The Sanford police chief immediately placed an urgent call to special investigative units, while also coordinating with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. Given the severity of the incident, authorities quickly determined this was not a random accident or a personal dispute. It was an organized act of violence, executed as part of an ongoing gang war. By the very next day, images of the dark-colored sedan flooded local news outlets and social media. A surveillance clip from a nearby convenience store captured the vehicle speeding away, the passenger side window still open. However, with no visible license plate or one possibly covered tracking, the car became an immensely difficult task. In the weeks that followed, a large-scale investigation was launched. Detectives began combing through hundreds of hours of surveillance footage from cameras across the area. They combed through data from the phones of those who attended the show, analyzing GPS coordinates, text messages, and social media posts before and after the event. Even the smallest traces, like a single like on a provocative post or a brief phone call at 2 a.m., were examined in detail. Within just a few weeks, the investigation began yielding results. Word from the underground started leaking about who was behind the attack. An anonymous witness told investigators they thought that van belonged to the rival crew, but they got the wrong people. That testimony revealed the heartbreaking truth. Princess was never the target. She was simply in the wrong place at the worst possible time. In early February 2024, after more than a year of investigation, 13 people were arrested in a sweeping crackdown. Among them were key figures of the OTF gang: Alvarez Cosby, Darling Siplin, Thalas Inman, Quadarius Holly, Robin Hickman Jr., Raequaries Davis, Ravonte Daniels, and several others. They faced charges ranging from murder and attempted murder to operating a criminal organization. However, one name remained beyond the reach of law enforcement: Trevon Vasco Law, believed to be the true mastermind. He vanished from Sanford shortly after the attack, leaving no trace behind. A statewide warrant was issued for his arrest. It wasn't until April 2024, after tracing a series of phone records tied to an alias, that police finally caught Trevon at a rented apartment in suburban Jacksonville. He offered no resistance, only bowed his head silently as the cuffs closed around his wrists. News of the arrest broke across evening broadcasts, while Princess's family wept openly. They knew capturing the suspect could never bring her back, but at the very least, it meant a piece of justice had finally been served. The Sanford community began holding vigils, lighting candles right at the intersection where the tragedy had unfolded. Bouquets of flowers, handwritten notes, and smiling photos of Princess were placed together, forming a small memorial corner. Everyone who passed by paused for at least a few seconds to remember, to reflect, or simply to not forget that an innocent woman lost her life right there. The charges included first-degree premeditated murder, conspiracy to commit murder, intentional infliction of serious bodily harm, operating a criminal organization, and using communication devices to coordinate criminal acts. This was not just a single murder case, it was part of a long-standing, complex gang network, operating with structure and strategy, more akin to an underground organization than random street violence. The lead prosecutor described the investigation as peeling back layers of a spider's web, where every action from a cryptic social media post to the exact placement of a car in a parking lot was intentional, calculated, and part of a broader scheme. The prosecution file spanned hundreds of pages. Evidence presented in court included surveillance footage tracking the sedan's movements before and after the attack, GPS location data pulled from the suspect's phones, recovered text messages and encrypted communications from messaging apps, ballistics analysis confirming that shell casings from the scene matched a firearm seized from one of the defendants, eyewitness testimony, including that of an individual who had helped plan the attack but backed out at the last minute and later cooperated with authorities. The official trial began in early March 2025. The courtroom was packed, filled with the victim's family, media representatives, and community advocates following the case closely. Princess Toliver's loved ones sat in the front row, their expressions tense yet resolute. Her mother held a large portrait of Princess on her lap, as if to remind everyone that the one who was taken was still present in that room. The prosecution opened with a powerful and emotional statement. Princess Toliver was not the target. She wasn't part of any fight. But it is precisely because of her innocence that we cannot remain silent. Justice is not only for those who have a voice, it is for anyone whose life is taken senselessly. Throughout the trial, defense attorneys argued that the technical evidence was merely circumstantial and that witness testimonies may have been influenced by fear or promises of leniency. Some defendants remained completely silent. Others denied any involvement, claiming they just happened to be near the scene. As for Trevon Vasco Law, the alleged mastermind, he initially refused to answer any questions, but in a surprising turn during the second week of trial, he suddenly changed his stance. In court, he spoke with chilling detachment. "I didn't aim for her. I didn't even know who she was." But his words did nothing to soften the room, because not knowing who she was doesn't absolve him of responsibility, not when a life was taken by his command. After more than 3 weeks of testimony, the jury took less than 2 days to deliver its verdict. All defendants were found guilty of first-degree murder and related charges. Trevon Law, along with the 2 identified shooters Marcus Thompson and Jarmichael Wright, were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The remaining defendants received prison terms ranging from 30 years to life, depending on their level of involvement. As the verdict was read aloud, Princess's mother broke down in tears. The courtroom fell silent. Justice had been served, not enough to bring her daughter back, but enough to ensure that Princess's death would not be forgotten. Outside the courthouse that day, Sanford residents gathered, holding candles, photos, and small handwritten notes that read, "Her life mattered." The lessons from this case no longer lived only in legal files. They had etched themselves into the heart of a community long accustomed to violence, but now unwilling to let silence win. Princess Aura Toliver lived a quiet, honest, and kind life, something no one could dispute. She had no ties to gangs, no part in any conflict, no enemies to speak of. And yet, it was that very innocence that made her death all the more heartbreaking. She wasn't the target, but she was still shot. She didn't choose the battlefield, but she was still caught in the crossfire. And when her van came to a halt against that tree, a piece of Sanford's soul collapsed with her. In the aftermath, Princess's mother struggled to survive each day beneath the weight of silent grief. Her grandchildren, Princess's nieces and nephews, kept asking, "Why isn't Auntie coming back?" And no one in the family could find an answer that made sense. The friends who once shared meals with her, strolled through weekend markets, and laughed over little things now stood quietly before her photo, holding back tears they couldn't stop. But the grief didn't end with one family. It spread into the backyards of Sanford's homes, into city council meetings where people began speaking louder about violence, about community accountability, about the quiet decay eating away at neighborhoods that once seemed peaceful. This case reveals a hard truth. Control is not love. Threats are not power. And silence must never be used to conceal evil. When social media becomes a weapon of provocation, When music and words are twisted into signals for bloodshed, we cannot stand by and pretend we don't see. Princess did nothing wrong, but she lived in a world where wrong didn't need a reason to find you. Her death is a wake-up call to all of us, that the signs of violence, no matter how subtle a cryptic post, a photo flaunting weapons, an anonymous message, can be the beginning of something devastating. And if we ignore them, if we choose to look away, there will be more like Princess good people, hard-working souls who never make it home. So speak up when you see something that doesn't feel right. Listen when someone says they don't feel safe. And trust your instincts, because sometimes they are the only line between life and death. If this story made you stop and think, share it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring more chilling, heartbreaking cases together, and leave a comment to let me know where you're watching from. Because sometimes, just one message from you could save someone out there.